Godzilla is now in New York City.
Monster 01 and 02, commence the attack.
Hello everyone and welcome to Stomp This Way. Today we are reviewing a big film, the second Hollywood attempt at a Godzilla movie, Godzilla, the 2014 version. Which, let me tell you, this was a movie that I was extremely hyped for. The marketing campaign for this film was one of the greatest and most misleading marketing campaigns I've ever seen. Like, whoever was in charge of the marketing campaign needed a promotion, he needed a raise, he needed the whole 9 yards, because I think most Godzilla fans, and I think general audiences too, were really hyped to see this movie. I mean, I think that's reflected in the numbers. We'll talk about them later, but this movie had a much larger than expected opening weekend, and then that opening weekend, domestically speaking, ended up being like half its domestic gross, because once people saw it, they were like, oh, well. But, yeah, so, I mean, you know, I was really hyped to see this movie. Obviously, by the time this movie rolled around, I was years entrenched into deep Godzilla fandom. But, how about you? Did you see this film when it was released?
No. I did not.
Oh, okay, well.
Not in theaters. I mean, I saw it when it first came to home video. I remember that. The marketing campaign, I mean, we just sat. I don't really remember the trailers a whole lot. I mean, I remember the trailers, but I don't vividly remember them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely misleading.
Yeah.
I'll give them that. They did a good job with the marketing and made the movie look a lot better than the finished product.
Yeah.
But I did not watch this movie when it came out in theaters. I didn't see it for probably close to a year or so after it came out, but probably 5 or 6 months after it came out on home video. I think I was like, I mean, might as well. Sat down and watched it, and I remember the first time I watched it. The very first time I watched it, I actually fell asleep about halfway through.
Well,
if that tells you anything.
Well, yeah, it does. And you've watched it a couple of times with us.
I've seen it 2 or 3 times since the last time we watched it, or the last time I watched it was actually before we saw King of the Monsters in theaters. I haven't seen it since, but this is about the fourth or so time. About the fourth or so time I've seen it.
Yeah,
it's over a year.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times by now. But yeah, this movie has a very interesting journey to the screen. So there was a lot of information on Wikipedia. I've pared it down some. But actually, interestingly enough, this film started way back. The origins date way back to 2004, just prior to the release of Godzilla Final Wars. And a man that we have talked about before named Yoshimitsu Banno, who was the director of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, and then, you know, afterwards was told that you're never going to work on a Godzilla film again. He had actually gotten the rights in August of 2004, which
Toho's like, yeah, you're never going to touch Godzilla again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, by the way, can I buy that? No.
Just a few months before Final Wars released, you know, and Toho was saying it's going to be the last Godzilla movie for a while, he acquired the rights to make a short IMAX 3D film with his own little production company that he had of a Godzilla movie, a short film, and it was tentatively called Godzilla 3D to the Max. I remember all this. I remember reading about it, being excited about it when they were talking about it. It was going to be either a loose remake or a loose sequel to Hedorah. I think it had some creature supposedly that they were going to call Deathla, and it was like a super powered version of Hedorah or something. But anyway, some American producers ended up getting signed on, and in 2007, they renegotiated the license with Toho to allow them to make a feature-length film. And then in 2009, the production team went to Legendary to secure backing, and Legendary ended up greenlighting the project in 2010, which is when this project really became kind of what we see on the big screen now. Bano, he remained on as an executive producer. He stepped down as the director of the project. Although he still planned on making a sequel to Hedorah, but he tragically passed away in May of 2017, so he never got the chance. But moving on past that, in licensing Godzilla, Toho had two demands: Godzilla be created by a nuclear incident, and the film be set in Japan. Both of those things are semi-true in the final film. And it was originally targeted to be released in 2012, but it ended up not coming out until 2014, which meant that Toho's promise of we're not going to have a Godzilla film for 10 years ended up coming true, even if by accident. This. Can you believe we're already 60 years into Godzilla?
Oh, God.
I only got a few more left, don't worry. This script went through a lot of hands, starting with David Callahan in 2010, whose draft was doctored by David S. Goyer of, superhero movie fame. And then went to Max Bornstein, who I think did some really major reworking on the script. I think he's the one that actually gets the main credit for writing this movie. Which then went to Drew Pearce, who then finally went to Frank Darabont, who, we talked about not too long ago with The Mist, who did a quote-unquote final rewrite, although it is said that then Tony Gilroy, some guy, I don't know, did some additional rewrites uncredited.
Tony Gilroy.
He did some additional rewrites uncredited right before they, I guess, really got into filming. It is said that it was Darabont's final rewrite that really convinced Bryan Cranston and Juliette, I'm not sure how to say her name. Binoche, who plays Bryan Cranston's wife in the film, to join the film, his rewrite of the whole nuclear meltdown scene or whatever. Allegedly, the lead role was first offered to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but he turned it down, which is unfortunate because he's actually a good actor. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Andy Serkis is said to have provided consultation on the movie's monster motion capture sequences because the monsters, at least Godzilla, I think the other two as well, are primarily motion capture in this film. Elements of bears, dogs, and eagles were incorporated into the design of Godzilla's face. The sound design team spent 6 months working on the roar. I read somewhere that when they were testing it out, they put it on some lot in Warner Brothers studio, and they were playing it so loud it could be heard 3 miles away.
Lord almighty.
And the production team also spent over a year designing the MUTOs because they wanted them to feel different than any other creature that had come before. But we'll talk about whether they succeeded or not in creature design. Mm-hmm. This is the tallest Godzilla to date, or at least to the date this movie was made, at 355 feet tall. Before the release, 3 producers who had been let go from the project sued Legendary for fees they believed they were owed. But the case was eventually settled in 2015, about a year after the movie came out. Akira Takarada did film a cameo for the movie, but it was cut in the final version. Edwards later admitted that his biggest regret was cutting that scene. He played an immigration officer or something in one scene. Most of the film was filmed in and around Vancouver, but some on-location filming was done in Honolulu. The U.S. Navy and Army both cooperated in the filming, and 3 aircraft carriers were used for the filming on the aircraft carrier in the movie. Edwards said that he tried not to place a camera where it'd be impossible for a person to have that camera in the film. So, yeah, we'll talk about how we feel about that later. But the effects were supervised by Jim Rigel, I guess, who supervised the effects on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Kyle Cooper, who we talked about doing the title sequence for Final Wars. He also did the title sequence for this film and for the sequel. And the film had an advertising budget of $100 million and a break-even point of $380 million, which leads us into box office, which was released on May 16th of 2014 with a production budget of $160 million.
Plus your $100 million for marketing.
So $260 million total. Opening domestic weekend of $93 million. Total domestic gross of right about $200 million, and a total worldwide gross of about $525 million. So
it made it some money.
So it made some. It was a moderate hit, which is why we got a sequel.
That was not a moderate hit.
It was not a moderate hit, but yeah. So that is the condensed version of how this movie came to the big screen. Obviously, there's a lot more out there if you want to read about it, but definitely an interesting journey to the screen. But we are going to listen to one of those amazing trailers for this film. And then we will come back, read off the cast and the crew, and Dylan will read off the plot summary, and we'll talk about Godzilla 2014. See you in a bit.
I want to talk to somebody in charge. You are not fooling anybody when you say that what happened was a natural disaster. You're lying. It was not an earthquake. It wasn't a typhoon. Because what's really happening is that you're hiding something out there. And it is going to send us back to the Stone Age. God help us all.
In 1954, we awakened something.
Well, there's nuclear tests in the Pacific. Not tests.
They were trying to kill it.
You have no idea what's coming.
Can you kill it?
The arrogance of man is thinking nature is in our control. And not the other way around.
All right, we're back.
What?
This film is directed by Gareth Edwards.
Who?
Quick side story. You know, when they were talking about, when they first announced this movie, you know, and they were talking about who's going to direct it. I had seen Monsters by that point, and I actually said, before he was ever mentioned, hey, they should get that guy who directed that little indie movie Monsters. And then not like 2 weeks later, they said, Gareth Edwards, announced director of Godzilla. I was like, oh my God, I can see the future. But anyway, written by a bunch of people, but credited writers are Max Bornstein and David Callahan. Music by Alexandre Desplat. I guess is how you say his name.
He's French, I believe.
Yeah, I think he did a couple of Harry Potter movies or something.
Yes, I think
He did the last two, I think.
Few.
And some other movies, but anyway, effects by like a main effects supervisor. Anyway, effects by a lot of people, but main effects
Lots of companies. No.
lots of people. Effects by Jim Rigel and starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Elizabeth Olsen, Juliette Binoche, Sally Hawkins, David Strathorn, and Bryan Cranston. With Bryan Cranston, as the credits do. I knew we were in trouble because, you know, the marketing made it seem like Bryan Cranston was the main character, but when the poster came out, it said starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Elizabeth Olsen, and then on the far right side it said with Bryan Cranston. I was like, that's a weird way to credit your main actor, even though he's like the main person on the poster, but whatever. But anyway, what is the plot?
Long.
Hey, it's pretty condensed.
It's an essay.
Whatever. Anyway.
15 years after his mother is killed during a mysterious incident at a nuclear power plant, Ford Brody must leave his wife and son and return to Japan to bail his father, Joe, out of jail for trespassing. Joe is convinced that there is some kind of cover-up going on at the power plant site, and he drags his son with him to investigate. They are arrested and taken to the site for questioning, but while there, a massive spore containing a MUTO, or massive unidentified terrestrial organism, hatches and goes on a rampage, killing Joe. After being questioned by Monarch scientists Serizawa and Graham about the nature of his father's investigation, Ford goes to Honolulu to catch a flight back to San Francisco. But while he is there, the MUTO attacks the airport. The Navy, with Serizawa and Graham in tow, rush to the scene, but they are beaten there by Godzilla, who engages in battle with the other creature. Later, it is discovered that the MUTO was communicating with the second spore located in the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository in Nevada. But the MUTO hatches before the military can reach it and proceeds to wreck Las Vegas. Graham and Serizawa deduce that the two creatures are male and female and plan to mate. The military decides to use a nuclear warhead to lure the two creatures into the open, but the female MUTO attacks the convoy and eats the warhead and makes her way to San Francisco. Godzilla and the two MUTOs converge on San Fran and throw down, while Ford, along with the military strike team, attempt to find and disarm the warhead before it goes off. They find it, and Ford is able to destroy the MUTO nest. Godzilla kills the male MUTO first, and then saves Ford from the female MUTO as he tries to get the warhead away from shore. Ford is picked up by a helicopter and flown to safety as the warhead detonates. Godzilla collapses after his duel with the two monsters, but in the morning, Godzilla awakens and trudges off toward the sea as a reunited Brody family watches. The media dubs him King of the Monsters, and the citizens of the city cheer him on as credits roll.
Yes. All right, so I guess we'll just get right into it. You know, I think let's talk about the positives of this film first. This film
Is gorgeous.
is gorgeous to look at. Gareth Edwards is second to none, or at least second to very few, I guess, when in terms of shooting a film, framing shots, creating a sense of scale, all that stuff. It's just done real. I mean, some lighting issues in the third act aside, this film it looks gorgeous. It looks amazing.
It's beautiful.
I mean, from beginning to end. I mean, I love the way that Gareth makes the way he frames the scale of these creatures. I mean, it's just beautiful. The way that Honolulu scene is filmed, where Godzilla, the slow reveal, and you see him first through the flare. I mean, in the sea, and then the flares going across his body, and then his foot coming down through the windows of the airport, and then that slow pan up. Oh man, that is a gorgeous scene. One of the best scenes in Godzilla history. It is amazing. And then again, at the end of the film, maybe I would say arguably the best scene in Godzilla history, they call now the kiss of death, where he grabs the female MUTO and pulls her jaws apart and breathes his fire down her neck and rips her head off. It's just an amazing scene, and there's so many examples you could take from this movie that just look amazing.
Yeah, no, the movie's definitely gorgeous. It's filmed incredibly.
Yeah, all the cityscape shots and stuff.
Definitely, like the shots of them jumping out of doing the halo jump toward the end of the film are gorgeous. The movie's beautiful.
Yeah, and
even the shots in like the title sequence, like of the shots that he got for this fake news footage of them nuking Godzilla back in the 50s, like the scene from the beach or whatever with the giant mushroom cloud. I mean, it's beautiful, very reminiscent of the end of Rogue One, but it's whatever.
Yeah, well, this came out first.
That's true.
And then the title shot itself with like the ashes falling, and then it transitions into like the scene from Jurassic Park, I call it, with the copter flying over. Yeah, this film looks amazing. And I think that the first 40 minutes or so, before Bryan Cranston dies, I think this movie actually does have some heart. I think this first scene is actually very emotional or the nuclear power plant scene at least. Very emotional with, Bryan Cranston's character of Joe Brody and his wife. And all that stuff that goes down there. Lots of foreshadowing. There is a ton of foreshadowing in this movie. Tons. But he gets a little overboard with that. But I think that Bryan Cranston actually does a good job of being the emotional heart of this movie. Yeah. Until he dies. But I think, getting into the big criticisms of this film, there are two, I think, main criticisms of this film. And the first one is that
not enough Godzilla.
There's not enough Godzilla. Which, there's about Godzilla has around about 10 minutes of screen time in this movie. Which, if you go back and look at the history of Godzilla films, there's quite a few Godzilla movies, quite a few really good ones, including the original, where Godzilla only really has 9 or 10 minutes of screen time. Mm-hmm. But I think the difference between this one and those is that most of those, especially talking about the original and some of those other ones, the plot is Godzilla centric. This one the movie is not really about Godzilla.
This movie has nothing to do with Godzilla until they mention his name at the 45.
I wrote, not including the whole title sequence stuff and some throwaway references at the beginning where they don't even say his name. They don't say Godzilla's name until 45 minutes into this movie. And
by the way, runtime is if you don't count the credits, it's an hour and 55 minutes long.
Yeah, 2 hours and 3 minutes total, counting credits. They say his name 45 minutes into this movie, and then he shows up right, almost like just short of
almost dead on the
an
hour
mark. I think it's actually like 59 minutes. But yeah, this movie is about the MUTOs, which, again, there's been a lot of Godzilla movies where Godzilla was played second fiddle to whoever his foe was for that movie. But the difference between this movie and those is that this is a rare, big Hollywood Godzilla production. This film, the 98 film, obviously had been done before, but that was very much maligned by not just the fan base, but pretty much everybody who saw it. This was a chance to really, make a Godzilla film, and they called it Godzilla. I think it was a big mistake to make this movie about the MUTOs because the MUTOs get quite a bit of screen time in this movie. And Godzilla's literally, the way they just treat Godzilla as it's kind of, he's also here, which that is a big problem I have with this film.
Definitely. I think, the thing that separates this from that original film, like you said, he doesn't show up for much screen time in that original film, but like you said, it centers around him. The whole story really is. And also that movie, it's got better written characters by a long shot, and it's a more dramatic and centered and grounded film. It feels like a post World War II drama, like dealing with the effects of how the atomic bomb affected the people of Japan, and then Godzilla just happens to be in that film. And it's kind of their way of incorporating how the people of Japan dealt with the atomic bomb. This is not that.
There's some references and some dialogue about how nuclear bombs are bad or whatever. And there is a scene I really like where Ken Watanabe hands the general his stopwatch, and he's like, it stopped, and he's like, at 8:15 on August 6th, 1945, and but mostly just some throwaway dialogue about nuclear weapons are bad.
But like the first 40 or like the first 45 minutes or so of this movie, I guess, we're before the first 40 minutes of the movie until Bryan Cranston's character dies. It's definitely the best part of this movie.
That's I think the human the second biggest criticism is that the human plot is bad, and I think the human plot is.
I think that's we've dealt with that a lot in a lot of these Godzilla movies.
We deal with that with a lot of Hollywood blockbusters.
Yes.
But and a lot of Godzilla movies aren't. But again, this is a big Hollywood. They had like 5 or 6 people work on this script. Okay, but I think the human plot isn't bad until Bryan Cranston dies, and when it's on Aaron Taylor Johnson's shoulders to carry this movie, it suffers because he's pretty wooden. He's pretty much a blank slate. And then his wife, played by Elizabeth Olsen. She's not given hardly anything to do except act worried about her husband, and she's a fine actress. Like later on, she's in a lot of these Marvel movies or whatever. She's a fine actress, but I really get frustrated with her. This is not her fault. This is the writing, but I get so frustrated with her character because she's always like, "Oh, I gotta wait on my husband. Oh, I gotta wait on my husband." I'm like, chick, grab your kid and get the hell out of Dodge. Jesus.
I don't understand her. I don't understand why they decided to go this route for this movie. I think Bryan Cranston is he's definitely one of the best actors in this movie. Between him and Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins, that's like the best actors in this movie. Mm-hmm. Why would you take them, especially Bryan Cranston, and have this 40-minute setup with this character and him and his son, and then kill him off? Yeah. Especially when you have that kind of talent.
Yeah. I wonder if it was a money issue because maybe Bryan Cranston was this was right on the heels of Breaking Bad.
Right at the end of Breaking Bad.
He was a big.
One more season left. I think
he was a big name. Mm-hmm. So maybe they didn't want to pay him to be on set the whole time. I don't know. I've never heard anybody officially say. I've heard that speculated. I've never heard anyone officially from the production.
But to me, it seems like it would have been a better option to go this route. Something more similar to some of these original Godzilla movies, where it's about like these scientists, trying to figure out what's going on, and Bryan Cranston's kind of there. He's he's dealing with the loss of his wife, but he's also a scientist too, so he's got data to support all this stuff that's going on. I think it would have been a better idea to follow him. Yeah. And then Aaron Taylor Johnson could have been there too.
He's in the background too. I will say the one thing I will give props to Aaron Taylor Johnson. He did a body transformation. If you saw him from Kick-Ass to this, it's a lot different.
He goes from that little bitty scrawny kid to. He's definitely packed on some muscle.
Yeah.
Which this is about the same time that he would have been cast in the MCU as well.
Yeah.
I think him and Elizabeth Olsen's first appearance is at the very end of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where they first show up as as Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't actually be
really
really prominent characters until Age of Ultron in 2015. But he dies at the end of that movie.
Yeah. So But it's just kind of.
So he kind of bulked up. So
he definitely bulked up a lot. Yeah, but I think once Bryan Cranston dies, the human plot just kind of loses all interest for me. Like
this movie has pretty bad pacing issues too. I mean, we get action sequences like toward the opening of this movie we have the plant meltdown or whatever.
Well,
it's not like action heavy per se.
Yeah.
MUTOs, you have it written down.
The first MUTO, the whole sequence where Joe dies or whatever at the plant. Yeah, that's at the 35-minute mark when the MUTO breaks free, and then
he dies at around what does that say right there?
Then he dies about 5 minutes later. That's about 41 minutes, and then the whole Honolulu sequence takes place about an hour into the movie.
So I mean, there's almost a 15-20 minute gap there where
but they show up at Honolulu, and then as soon as Godzilla shows up, they cut away and you see a brief skirmish like on the TV screen or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I say Godzilla showed up in San Fran at an hour 25, and then I think the battle really starts in earnest around an hour 38. But that's the thing with this movie is that they cut away, like they'll tease the action a lot, and then he cuts away.
Yeah, and then it cuts away. This movie very much centers, after Bryan Cranston dies, very much centers around this warhead plot of Aaron Taylor Johnson and all these military guys trying to get this warhead to San Francisco so they can lure the MUTOs away, and it's boring.
Yeah, and I think as a whole, Gareth Edwards did a good job of grounding this movie, but I'm just going to say I'm not in the military, but I don't think you can just hop around military units like Aaron
I don't
Taylor
think
Johnson
you can
does.
hop around branches like he does. I mean, he specifically states he is a member of the United States Navy, and I'm pretty sure, based on all of the branding on everything, I want to say that this is the Air Force. Like, the bomb says the United States Air Force. A lot of the other equipment says the United States Air Force.
Someone says Army at one point.
It's either the Air Force or the Army.
Yeah.
I don't think you can just hop from the Navy to the Army. Now, granted, it's an emergency situation, so maybe they'd be like, sure, you got military experience. Oh, you're a bomb guy. Sure.
But the military is made for emergency situations, okay? Like, I don't think that's how this works.
But I don't think you could just be like, I'm in the Navy. I'm going to be with you guys now. You guys are in the Air Force or Army or whatever. I'm going to be with you guys.
I'm going to hop right on
just
your
for
plane.
plot convenience.
I'm going to be on your strike force.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a part of this. I'm part of this team getting this warhead, to San Francisco. And then at one point, he somehow gets recruited to be a part of this Halo.
They
jump.
act like he is the only bomb expert in the entire military.
Yeah.
He's there.
He's there. Which that kind of bugged me, but. Whatever. Aside from that, this movie is it's not as plot hole riddled or as ridiculous as King of the Monsters.
No.
They do act a couple times like you're supposed to be able to see and smell radiation when I'm like, no, but whatever. But I will give Gareth Edwards props again. I think he did it for a movie about giant radioactive monsters. I think he did a pretty good job of grounding it. It feels like a grounded monster movie, which a lot of that, I think is give credit to Edwards for that.
I think that probably comes from his
direction,
his indie background.
Yeah. I think he did a lot with this $160 million budget. I mean, it's $160 million, but
coming from supposedly, around $500,000, which we talked about that you said he ended up coming in way under that.
Yeah.
So let's just say he made that movie for $250,000 even, and $250,000 compared to $160 for someone who's not used to working with that kind of money. What he was able to accomplish is pretty.
Solid. In 2014, obviously 160 is a lot of money, but for a effects-driven movie, it's not huge money. It's not. We're not talking like, Harry Potter
No,
Avatar money.
We just on our YouTube channel, we just reviewed Spider-Man 2. That movie came out in 2004. It had a budget of $200 million, and it came out 10 years before. This.
Titanic and that
Titanic had like almost a $200 million
Kevin Costner
budget or
movie.
like that. Waterworld, like one of the most expensive movies ever made.
Yeah, this is like a $200 million movie way back in the late 90s. So, I think he did a really economical job with this movie, but we'll talk more about that in the effects. But yeah, so... it is, this movie is, once we get into this final fight and the monsters are throwing down, I will say that a lot of people talk about the lighting issues. I think my Blu-ray copy, is actually not that badly underlit. I've seen photos from some home video releases where you really can't tell anything that's going on. But mine's not that bad. Or it might be some of my TV too, I don't know. But, the action's pretty good.
The action's entertaining. I just wish that there was... more Godzilla action.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of generic to say.
Yeah,
that could be a complaint about a lot of movies.
Yeah,
and I feel like we all three of us kind of go back and forth on like it doesn't have enough Godzilla or it needs more. It needs more Godzilla.
Yeah.
But some of these movies that we've talked about that we've really enjoyed don't have as much Godzilla as we say.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just really all boils down to the story that's surrounding it.
Yeah.
And how entertaining your action sequences are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish that this movie the action was more Godzilla centered. Even if you're going to have little Godzilla in it, I wish it would have been more akin to like the original Godzilla. It would have been about him per se. Like maybe he's not like the savior of the world that he is in this movie.
He's not the bringer of balance or whatever.
Yeah, maybe he is the villain. He comes in and he destroys the city and is attacking whatever city he wants to.
And the MUTOs just kind of happen to be in his way or something.
They just kind of happen to be in his way, yeah. But,
and I think Gareth is a little too devoted to this idea of we can only see the fight through human vantage points or whatever.
I think having those wide shots, of sweeping wides of where we pan out and see the action, I think is helpful.
Yeah,
especially when you have 400 foot tall monster fighting each other. It helps to understand what's going on and visually see what's going on. I think that would also help with your lighting issue because if you're trying to get shots of this monster action from on the ground where a person is in a dark city with giant monsters standing over you, probably not going to be very bright.
Yeah. There are some good shots of the monster, but a lot of them I think I don't know. It is what it is, I guess, and that's his artistic choice, whatever. But yeah, and then this movie does. I think it borrows a little bit from the '98 film, even if it doesn't want to admit.
It borrows a couple of things.
It borrows from
the whole egg thing going on,
and then this shot where like the mom Muto, the female Muto, is looking down at it all, the burning nest, and then she looks up and sees forward. That's taken straight from the '98 Godzilla movie. And then of course he borrowed, like all other Godzilla movies, they borrow from other Godzilla movies,
all a bunch of references,
and borrow from some other Hollywood movies.
There's a bunch of foreshadowing, like we said. Down to like paper mache things at the beginning of the movie, little bitty.
The logo on the stupid power plant kind of looks like a Muto.
All kinds of just random little visual, cues or triggers.
I will say it's kind of funny. They try really hard to make Godzilla out to be the hero in this movie, but no one mentions that I'm pretty sure his tsunami in Hawaii killed hundreds, if not thousands, of people. But it was. Collateral damage. What is what it is. But
or all the people that he probably killed in San Francisco that probably didn't get to evacuate.
Yeah.
Or
on the bridge, he just walks right through the
or we get repercussions that echo in King of the Monsters. Vera Farmiga and Kyle Chandler's family lose a son.
Yeah.
It's whatever.
It's whatever. It's not their fault for not.
Godzilla came and killed the MUTOs. Okay, that's what matters.
That's what matters.
That's what matters.
He's a hero.
He's a hero. But anyway,
he's an anti-hero.
He's an anti-hero. Is probably what they're trying to call him. But is what it is.
Is what it is.
Is what it is.
As far as the plot of this movie goes, would you say it's better than King of the Monsters?
Human plot. I think both the human plots in both films are not good.
They're both lackluster.
But I actually think that, like I said, for the first 40 minutes or so, I actually enjoy Bryan Cranston, which is more than I can say for really any character in King of the Monsters. And I also think Kim Watanabe and Sally Hawkins are good for what they're given to do in this movie. Which, I can say the same.
Definitely given more to do in this movie than in King of the Monsters.
I mean, Kim Watanabe.
Sally Hawkins literally goes out at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, Kim Watanabe is good again in King of the Monsters. He's the best part of that movie too. But I think it is. I think this movie is better written.
Yeah.
Than the King of the Monsters.
I agree.
Which is kind of hard to say, but whatever. But it is what it is.
Creatures.
I will say. I don't know. I think the monster action itself, as a whole, is probably better in King of the Monsters.
Yeah, but, especially with all the the classic monsters coming back in that movie,
and just the amount of it.
Yeah, but, I think probably that.
And pacing. I mean, there's just a lot more monster action.
There's a lot more monster action. There's a lot more stuff going on in that movie.
Yeah, it's harder to get bored during King of the Monsters. But I'll say where I think is better as a whole. I think I said in King of the Monsters that I thought that film was better as a whole. And
almost a little over a year ago.
I'll reevaluate that at the end of this podcast. But anyway, you said
creature design.
We always start
with the king.
With the king, Godzilla. When this movie came out, there was a big deal about him being a little overweight.
He's a chunky boy.
There are some shots where he looks really fat.
He's a chunky boy.
He looks really fat. Big. As a whole, I mean, obviously it's a big improvement over the 98 Godzilla. His elephant feet, because he doesn't have toes, he has elephant feet.
He definitely does have elephant feet.
It doesn't really bother me. It's kind of a weird choice. I'm not really sure why. And then he's got more of a mammalian head than Godzilla tends to have. Which is fine. It allows him to have more expressions and stuff.
I like him.
But as a whole, I like him. He's a good return to form.
He's definitely with increasing in size to this large. He's definitely more grand and epic feeling and looking. Yeah. And once we get the shots of his tail and his spines and stuff. Yeah. They look really good. Yeah. He looks very scaly and rocky. Kind of.
What do you think about his heat breath? His heat ray.
I love. That's one of my favorite things about these new Godzilla movies. The legendary ones. His power up before he shoots his.
And I love it. This one, it literally starts at the end of his tail and it powers up. It's a little more, I guess, like gaseous in this film. Not as much as a beam.
Yeah.
Then they'll kind of retcon that in the sequel too. But no, as a whole, I like Godzilla. I think, like I said, a good Hollywood redesign that's pretty faithful while being an update at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little chunky.
For the most part, I mean, I'd say his body, not including his head, I'd say his body, and not counting his head and his feet, his body, though it's larger, is pretty reminiscent to the original. Just, more
he hunches over some.
Yeah.
And his arms, usually like...
They're very T-Rexy.
Well, I was going to say, actually, like in the Japanese movie, he usually tends to hold them up like a T-Rex. He kind of just dangles them at his size a lot in this movie, But no, I like it. I like that he uses his tail attack. He brings back his tail attack like a classic.
He moves that one MUTO right into that
building.
And then it collapses
on him. And then it collapses on him. But no, I like Godzilla.
The MUTOs. Start with the male MUTO.
Start with the MUTO. I said when we were talking about the making of, they spent a year designing these things because they
wanted to be original.
But I gotta say, and they're not the only film to commit this sin. Pretty much every film since 2007 has, but I still definitely feel the influence of Cloverfield on these MUTOs with the,
they do look a lot like the Cloverfield
dangling extra limbs, and and they're just the way they move, and
he's very, very much, I would say, inspired by the Cloverfield monster with the long legs and the very angular, sharp design.
Especially the female MUTO.
And his head is very...
Are we talking about the male or the female? The male.
We're talking about the male right now. His head's very, very angular and kind of extraterrestrial looking.
Yeah. The male's... His big difference...
I will say... In certain shots, especially once you see that he can fly, he looks a lot like Rodan.
He does. Yeah. And when the first trailer that showed him came out, a lot of people were like, is that an update on Rodan? I think with both MUTOs, they're fine. But
he's also smaller than the female.
He's also a lot smaller.
Yes.
But my thing is, like, their features are almost too angular, like too sharp. Like, it doesn't look like something that would occur naturally. It looks like something that was made, or, But, they look fine.
The female MUTOs, she's huge.
She's huge. She's about Godzilla size.
She's closer to Godzilla size. She's got this big old head. It's almost pentagon shaped with how angular it is. Yeah. It's like, boom.
Yeah. They look fine. They're not the worst looking Godzilla villains ever. And they look kind of menacing. I think they're did a decent job, especially
Definitely
with
not
her
the most menacing
red
villains
glowing
that
or
he's,
orange glowing eyes or whatever.
enemy
And
that he's faced
Yeah.
in the franchise, but
that shot, I love
They're
the shot
okay.
where like she walks over the Brody and you can see the orange egg sack. That's kind of funny.
I really wish they would have found something different to name them.
Then
I mean,
MUTOs.
MUTOs, okay.
It doesn't bother me.
I mean,
it's a little more realistic.
It doesn't
like,
bother me. I mean, yeah, MUTO.
It's a little more realistic than them just coming up with
a name.
Which I guess, in King of the Monsters, all those names were supposedly like rooted in local legends or whatever. But it feels more realistic to me that this is what the military did. They would come up with some kind of anagram,
some sort of acronym.
Acronym. I said anagram. Acronym that would
It feels more. It feels more realistic and grounded. I don't know. MUTO doesn't bother me per se.
Yeah.
I just think it would have been more clever if they would have come up for an actual name for it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fine with me, I guess. But yeah, as a whole, the MUTOs are fine.
They're fine.
Nothing special. Do you like their little EMP burst they do?
I guess.
It's alright.
It's fine.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily affect the plot a whole lot. I mean,
It actually does because the whole analog warhead thing
Gas. No.
Yeah, and it makes for some cool sequences of some planes falling out of the
Falling out of
sky,
the sky,
which
but
leads
yeah,
them to some very 9/11 imagery. But
yes,
whatever. But
effects.
Let's
talk about the elephant in the room, the CGI.
I actually think the
It's
CGI is
good.
really good in this
It's
movie.
good.
Especially on a $160 million budget. That's what I was talking about him being economical. I think it looks really good.
The CGI on Godzilla and the MUTOs is top notch.
Yeah.
I would say really, really good for a Hollywood budget. Very effects driven giant monster film.
Yeah.
Much better than the 98 Godzilla.
Much better.
I mean,
much better than any of the Japanese
To be fair,
Godzilla.
almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
But
much better than any Japanese Godzilla movie.
Yes.
It looks really good. Godzilla especially looks amazing. I mean,
Definitely.
they spend a lot. There's a lot of CGI artists that spend a lot of time on Godzilla in this movie.
I imagine.
he looks great. And then the practical effects, which I mean, there's not a whole lot, I guess, but when they do happen, they look good. So I think effects are really good. I mean, they're top notch blockbuster effects. There's nothing. There's nothing that scene in Hawaii when the tsunami shows up. I think that looks. In the trailers it looked kind of sketched, but I think in the finished product it looks really good.
Fully rendered.
Fully rendered. It looks really good, and so I think this film looks like we said
Looks good.
Visually.
Visually, this film's
Gareth
fantastic.
Edwards, you cannot. Any of his films, you cannot say he is a great visual director. It's just when it comes to character development, sometimes he struggles a little bit.
I'll give him this. I mean, we put a lot of. The film as a whole, I guess, is his vision, but he didn't write it.
He didn't write it, no, and he
So
didn't
it's
write
not-
Rogue One either.
It's not his fault per se that the characters suck, but as a director, you should be able to draw out good performances in your actors, whether or not your script is top notch or not.
Yeah, I would
Draw
say
out those performances.
look at a film because they borrowed a piece of music that's obviously it's a classical piece of music, but it's most famous for being in 2001. Look at 2001. No one's really greatly written in there, but just the film is so amazing visually, and the way that Kubrick was able to tell that story visually, he didn't really care about the characters. You're just like, whoa.
Cool.
Anyway, but no, effects great.
Definitely
Score by Alexandre
I really
Desplat.
like the score for this movie, actually.
I think it complements. I mean, it's not a Fukube.
It's not a Fukube.
But it complements
it's
the
not,
movie.
It's not, your I wouldn't say it's a classic Godzilla score by any means, in my opinion. It feels more like a Hollywood blockbuster type score.
But it fits the movie really well.
Definitely.
I think it, and that main theme for Godzilla, I think, is actually pretty
as far
good.
as like scores for Hollywood blockbuster movies, like a Hollywood blockbuster giant monster movie, it's probably up there.
Yeah, it sounds really good.
It's definitely better than the 98 Godzilla score.
Oh yeah.
There are things I like about King of the Monster score better though, just because they bring back classic themes. But it doesn't feel King of the Monster score doesn't feel as original as this.
It's not.
As far as original music goes for a Godzilla movie, a giant monster, especially made for American.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, and it's menacing when it needs to be. It's sad when it needs to be. It's
very subdued in certain moments, which is really cool. There's that one scene with Godzilla where he's walking through and they kind of drop out all the sound except for Godzilla moving around.
Except for the bass sound.
And the score, they don't even have that bass sound. It's just Godzilla walking around. You got here going. moving around, and the score is really subdued. Yeah. It's really cool. But it fits the movie really well.
Yeah, there's a lot of deep bass sounds in this movie too.
There's a lot. Very, very generic blockbuster. Ooh.
But it matter, if you're gonna have those generic sounds, a giant monster movie is the movie to have them in. So. But I think it's time for some final thoughts. Andrew, would you like to start?
Well, I think this movie it's an alright movie for the first 45 minutes of storyline at least. And the effects are really good. I like the effects. I'm gonna give this a B.
A B. Dylan, what do you think?
Yeah. It's not a bad movie per se. It's just slow for a lot of the movie, and I wish that they would have, in my opinion, focused. I know that we've talked about it, and I've said it already. Is the very generic complaint of there's not enough Godzilla in this movie, but it really is a major complaint for this movie. This movie has almost nothing to do with Godzilla, except for like the last half-ish.
Yeah.
Very much about the MUTOs, and I think it focuses too much on that storyline and what's going on with Aaron Taylor Johnson and how he ties into what's going on with these MUTOs, versus what we should have done is just focusing on maybe the military working to take out Godzilla or something like that. Godzilla not being the hero for this movie, I think it would have been a lot smarter to be more classic Godzilla, like in the original film, where he is the villain and he's rampaging through a city, and like you said, maybe the MUTOs just happen to be there. They're an obstacle in his way of rampaging or something because he's just pissy. But overall, the action is fun to watch. I'll give it that. It's engaging and it's really fun. And this film is like we said already multiple times, is visually stunning. It's gorgeous to watch. But other than that, there's not a whole lot I can compliment this movie on. It's pretty slow. It gets very plotting at times. I wish the pacing was better. The effects are excellent, and the score is really good for this movie. It complements it very well. It's okay. As far as a Hollywood outing goes, as an American Hollywood outing, I would say it's probably the best out of the three so far. American Godzilla movies. Mm-hmm. I'll give it a B minus.
B minus. All right. Yeah, when the trailers, like I said, that I got so hyped for this because they really made you think that Godzilla was going to be the main foil in this movie, and then there were going to be some other monsters that he might fight. And after seeing the film, I think it's not so much a screen time problem. It's the fact that Godzilla is not the center of this plot. That is a problem, especially, like I said, I know there's a lot of Japanese Godzilla movies where he's not the center of attention, but when this is only, like I said, the second major Hollywood attempt at a Godzilla film, and the movie is called Godzilla, is his name slapped on the poster, it needs to be about Godzilla. He needs to be the main foil in this movie. He needs to be the one destroying these cities. He needs to be the one that the military is trying desperately to stop and failing. The fact that we spend so much of this movie barely referencing Godzilla and so worried about these MUTOs is a real problem for me. I think it was a mistake on the part of these writers. But, like we said, visually stunning. That really helps this movie a lot. I like the human drama for the first 40 minutes until Joe Brody is killed. And then once Aaron Taylor Johnson has to carry this movie, it really suffers because neither he or Elizabeth Olsen are interesting at all. Ken Watanabe does the best with what he's given to do. He has the classic, "let them fight" line. But aside from that, the human drama once Bryan Cranston is gone is just not compelling in the least. And it's kind of stupid with Ford jumping around military units like he does, because I just don't think that's possible. The fight sequences, like I said, a lot of fans complained because Gareth was too devoted to this idea of seeing the fights from a human vantage point. I don't think it kills this movie. I still think there's some good sequences in this movie. I think he is a little too devoted to it in times. And I do get a little tired of him cutting away from, it's kind of funny the first couple times he cuts away from a big monster fight, but after a while it does get kind of old. I know there's a lot of issues with lighting, especially towards the last act of this movie, on some home video releases at least, that I wish the studio would have been more careful to, handle. But, as a whole, I said in our review of King of the Monsters, one of our very first episodes, like you said, our
third episode,
like a little over a year ago now, that I thought that King of the Monsters was a better movie. I was wrong. It's not. This movie is better in almost every aspect. I'd say in some ways the monster action is better. in King of the Monsters, and I like obviously Ghidorah Mothra, and Rodan better than I do the MUTOs. But in terms of just the way that Gareth was able to create this massive sense of scale for these monsters, is just second to none. And just visually as a whole, this movie is superior. Even though the human drama is not good in this movie, it's better than what it was at any point in King of the Monsters. It's better written. King of the Monsters may be a little better paced, but that's just because it's so loaded with monster action. It's hard to get bored. This movie is much more grounded. I prefer darker, grounded films, which I can enjoy a light, goofy Godzilla movie, but I love especially the attempt that Gareth made to make this a darker, grounded film, much more than I do the more goofy aspects of the King of the Monsters. The score is good. It's not, I like King of the Monsters score better, obviously, because I'm so nostalgic for Ifukube's music, but score is good for this movie. And, I think that this is a decent attempt at a Hollywood Godzilla blockbuster. I think, even though I overranked it, looking back on it, I think I gave King of the Monsters a B-. So I'm kind of obligated to give this movie one step above. I'll give it a B. Which, I think, especially considering our curve we always talk about, I think this movie is probably deserving for a B, just visually alone. I'd say it's probably a middle tier Godzilla movie, maybe upper middle tier Godzilla movie. It's definitely in the top half, I would say. Yeah, I was, the first time I watched it, I went in, I was super excited. And when I went and saw it with my dad, and when we walked out, he was like, well, what'd you think? I was like, it's okay. I guess I was really, because we look at, since then we've had a reboot of Star Wars, The Force Awakens, which I really like The Force Awakens, 8 and 9 aside. I really like The Force Awakens. We rebooted the Jurassic Park franchise, and I know a lot of people don't like Jurassic World, but I really enjoy Jurassic World.
World's fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Sequel aside. And, even the 2009 Star Trek movie, it's very fun. I've
got personal problems with it, but if I was able to strip my Star Trek bias away and just look at it as an action film, it's a really good reboot. And I just don't think that this film is quite there.
Yeah.
But
as far as reboots of old franchises, definitely.
Now, it's better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
A lot of things are.
Yeah. But anyway, speaking of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, we have a little bit of news to talk to you about. We're
quitting. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we're quitting this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. We got a long ways to go. We have done some rebranding, though.
Yeah.
Over at our other personal project.
Yeah, so our YouTube channel, as we have been promoting here recently, had been previously known as DNA Productions. Well, to avoid a copyright infringement or lawsuit of a possibly defunct dead company, I mean, it's defunct according to the internet, but that doesn't mean someone out there couldn't still
hold
sue
the whole
us.
Copyright.
We decided to rebrand our YouTube channel as DNA Film Reviews. It makes it much easier to find everywhere. Yeah. We could have our own social media handles and tags on all of our platforms. So everything is now DNA Film Reviews. It makes us easier to find on YouTube. When you search DNA Film Reviews, all one word, all lowercase, it's like the first thing that pops up is videos of us. When you search DNA Film Reviews on like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, which we're all up on, it's like the first thing to pop up. Yeah. So DNA Film Reviews. Check us out if you like hearing us talk about monsters.
Just posted.
Talk about all kinds of movies. We just posted
Inception and Spider-Man. Sam Raimi's
first Spider-Man movie. We're going to continue with the next 2 of those, and then we have some other stuff in the works. Yeah. So keep a lookout for that.
That's right. As far as this podcast goes, no really news related to giant monsters.
No. Your Gamera set will be in a couple weeks.
My Gamera set will be in a couple weeks. There are some unboxing videos you can now watch on YouTube. It looks impressive. I'm excited. I did see where, speaking of Arrow Video, they are going to release, I believe the film is called, I haven't actually seen it, it's called Warning from Space, which is a classic Daiei, speaking of Gamera, classic Daiei science fiction film, which I actually think is Japan's first in-color science fiction film, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, they're going to do a release of that. And we're going to be reviewing Attack on Titan Part 1, which is the live-action adaptation of the Attack on Titan anime, which the reason we're doing it is because the director of that film, Hideaki Anno, is the director, one of the two directors on
Shin Godzilla.
Shin Godzilla. Which, speaking of news, I did see where the actor who plays Eren, the main character, Eren is the main character in Attack on Titan, yeah. Eren, the main character in the live-action adaptation of Attack on Titan, he actually just passed away just a little while ago at the age of 30. I didn't read what happened to him, but that's really tragic, actually. But we're going to be watching that film, which is building up to Shin Godzilla, and we're also going to, since we did the first one, we're going to watch the sequel, Attack on Titan Part 2.
Before we watch the first anime film.
Before we watch the first anime film.
Godzilla film, anime Godzilla film, to specify.
Yeah, we only got 4 Godzilla movies left, guys.
I think it would be cool. I mean, I know it's not on the plan or in the schedule, but after reviewing this, and our thoughts and opinions on that, I think it would be cool because it's been over a year to go back and revisit King of the Monsters. Yeah. I know it's not in the cards, but maybe if we have a little extra time, we can go back and maybe do a quick update on our thoughts on it at a later date. But maybe
when Godzilla vs. Kong comes out, we can do a little 5-minute section at the beginning of the episode. Looking back on the MonsterVerse.
Looking back on the
because we still have a MonsterVerse film to go, Kong Skull Island, which we have not reviewed yet. Yes, actually, I mean
the last one probably.
Previewing my thoughts, I still think Kong Skull Island is the best MonsterVerse film. So look forward to that. I also just since we're talking here, I'm sure I know I've heard about the movie before. I just forgotten about it. But I rediscovered one of Ishiro Honda's earlier films, Half Human, and I ordered probably a bootleg of the original Japanese cut of the film off eBay, which we're going to be getting in. So
I have subtitles.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
It also has a timestamp in the upper right-hand corner, I guess. But, whatever.
Yay.
Because I did rework the schedule. I just want to talk about that. I reworked the schedule, so I put Half Human in place of Godzilla vs. Kong's November slot. I moved Godzilla vs. Kong to May.
When it's supposed to come out, right?
When it's supposed to come out.
Like that?
Yeah, and I moved whatever movie was there down on the list. So I can't remember even what it was now.
Whatever.
So,
Stuff. But if you want to see that schedule, we have a website if Andrew wants to tell you what it is.
Well, that website is at www.staunchestway.podbean.com.
That's right. And
like I said, you can go for it.
Like Dylan said, you can see our full schedule of events along with backlogged episodes, news and updates, and some other stuff. But we also have some social media accounts, right?
We do. We're up on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're at Stomp This Way on all those platforms. Make sure you give us a like or a follow. Be sure to tell your friends about it if you like hearing us talk.
About monster movies. That's right.
Make sure you check out our YouTube channel, like I said.
And check out our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That'd be really nice. But
we're up to a whopping 25 subscribers.
I do have this set to automatically post these as audio files to YouTube. Now, I looked at it the other day. These. And it seems to kind of pick and choose which ones it does. So you might find these on YouTube. You might not. I don't really know. But anyway, aside from that, like I said, we're going to be watching Attack on Titan Part 1 next week. So join us for that. And if you're not interested in joining us for that, do check out the anime because, we'll talk about the movie, but the anime is actually pretty good. Anyway, aside from that, I think that's all we got for you this week. As always, I am Aaron.
I am Andrew.
And I'm Dylan, and we'll catch you in the next one.